Welcome, everyone. This is our April meeting of the Pine Hills Neighborhood Association. Tonight, we're going to hear from Ron Lesko from the City School District of Albany, who will be talking about their budget situation. And then we will have our usual committee and officer reports. Next month, on May 20th, we'll have Albany Mayor Kathy Sheehan with us to talk about all the things that are going on with the city of Albany. And so we hope you'll join us for that. So with that, I'm going to go to Ron Lesko, who will be talking about the city school district's budget and other issues. Ron, to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, John. And thanks everyone for giving us this opportunity to be here tonight to talk about where we're at with our budget. Currently, it's still under development, but glad to have the opportunity to talk with you about where we're at now. It will come together very quickly over the next week, as you'll see as we carry on, which I'm about to do. We'd like to begin all of our presentations with our guiding principles, our vision statement, our mission statement, and our goals, just to remind us of where we're going, where we're headed, and what our goals are as we move forward and all that we do. And certainly at this time of year, in the budget development process, that is especially critical. Oops. These are the handful of topics I'm going to cover tonight, and I'm going to go through it. And I'm glad to take any questions. I will leave it to you, John, to decide if you want to take those along the way or save them to the end. Either would work fine for me.
It usually works best if we wait till the end on Zoom. But if anyone has an urgent question for clarification, go ahead, put it in the chat, and I will try to alert you to it if you don't see it. Thanks, Ron.
Right. Sure. And I've got about 20 slides, so if I'm getting bogged down, or if you need me to speed up, or maybe move ahead a little quickly, I'm glad to do that as well. So please feel free to stay on top of me there too. So I wanted to start just with a brief update of kind of where we've been at with COVID-19 through the school year. As you can see, we've had a total of 336 COVID cases in the school district since the school year began in September, more or less evenly split between individuals who are on site or in our buildings and individuals who are off site working or learning remotely. And you can see the month by month breakdown there, and it's, it mirrors the rise that we've seen in the community at large. In the fall, it was relatively low. As we started to get near Thanksgiving, it started to increase, and certainly after Thanksgiving, and a couple of weeks after Thanksgiving, as the winter break was coming up, it really started to increase. And then January, again, as it was in society, we had 4.5 or so new cases per day on average. So there was, as we all know, a very significant surge. That about the middle of February, right about as Valentine's Day, that period of time, as we got into there, it started to recede a little bit. And you can see the cases for February averaged 1.6 and started to come down even a little bit more in March. They were lower through mid-March even, and so they started to creep back up again near the end of March, and they sort of sustained at that level to date. You can see we've had about 1.2 new cases per day so far. This month, no new cases today, which is a good thing. But it is COVID-19, as we all know, is still very much with all of us in society, even though we do seem to be moving very much in the right direction. But it is something that we are still very much cognizant of in all of the planning that we do. And here's a brief overview of all of that. We are following all of the required COVID-19 precautions, which include cleaning and sanitizing all of our spaces on a daily basis. And I won't read through the litany of the efforts that we're undertaking. But masks, hand hygiene, social distancing remain very paramount for us in all of our buildings and on all of our buses as we continue to move through this, and we continue to urge everyone to do the same things in their personal lives, so that we can all work together to stop the spread of this terrible disease. We had a new element in our budget process this year. We established a community budget committee this year, and I think there were 6 or 8 individuals who came together as part of that group to take a thoughtful approach in partnership with district staff to what kinds of things should we be thinking about as a school district as we're planning the budget for the 21-22 school year. And you can see some of the top priorities that came out of those discussions that group had over the winter months. And they do very much align with where we are as a school district. The highest quality instruction possible and opportunities for learning acceleration, closing learning gaps. And we know that we've had significant learning gaps during COVID-19, just like all school districts have experienced because of the way that traditional education that we're very much used to has been so interrupted. It's been a very challenging time to say the least. Equity is a very high priority for us as a school district, and we were glad that was a very high priority for the committee as well. A couple of things that the board is talking about still, and I do think will be part of the budget for next year, although that's not determined yet, is reestablishing the Albany International Center and the Tony Clements Center as standalone building-based programs. Those were a couple of the programmatic reductions that we had back in the fall when the full weight of the COVID-19 fiscal crisis started to set in on us. So we are looking forward to the opportunity to restore those programs. But again, the board is still working through all of those details. So here's kind of going to take a chronological walk through the budget development, and this is where we began. The budget that the community approved last June was about $268.5 or $6 million. And then in late August, right as we were ready to begin the school year with our reopening plans, the state communicated to schools, municipalities that they were beginning to withhold 20% of their aid payments. And at that point, we were still in the end of the 1920 fiscal year, so it hadn't gotten into the first payments of this current fiscal year yet. That's the normal cycle that the state is always on. But they were very clear that they were beginning to withhold those payments. We did see those withholds from last school year in August, July actually, and in August, and we knew we had to plan accordingly. So as you all may remember, in September, we very painfully, but we feel in a very fiscally responsible way, reduced about 215 positions from the school district and moved all of our students in grades 7 through 12 to a full, all of our regular education or general education students to a full distance learning environment. And we're just building back from that now and looking forward to building back even more when the fourth quarter begins, actually for our seniors next week. So you can see the reductions that we experienced in our budget through that process. And so that got us down to a budget target for this year of about $246 or $247 million. And that's where we began when we started to look ahead to the 21-22 school year. So that in the winter, as we get into December and January and February, we begin looking at what a rollover budget would look like for us, what it would cost to sustain what we have, and what the built-in increases that we know we're going to have are. And you can see how some of those were factored in February, increases in health insurance and contractual salary increases and the like as you go down through the table. That those were costs that we knew we were going to be incurring additional costs in 21-22. So in February, we had an adjusted rollover budget at that time of about $256.5 million, looking ahead to next year. And that was with the staffing that we were at that time. We hadn't begun building back at that point yet. That included the reduction of the 215 or so positions that we eliminated in September. And I do want to circle all the way back, and I'll get to it again in the presentation. But just as a reminder, our budget last year that was approved in June also eliminated about 140 positions from the school district, as we were just beginning to feel the first effects of the state's pullback in revenue and pullback in funding due to COVID-19. So it has been a very, very difficult, just like it has for everyone in society in different ways, very difficult year for us in terms of our staffing and the programs that we're able to provide for our students. Then the good news finally started to happen, and as you all recall, the state was very consistent last fall that there was nothing they could do until they knew what their support from the federal government was going to be. So we were all waiting and waiting and waiting to see what would transpire from the federal government. It quickly became clear through the fall that we were going to have to wait for the elections in November. And then when the elections in November came, it became clear that before we knew what the federal government ultimately was going to do or be able to do for states, municipalities, school districts in terms of aid, COVID-19 relief, we were going to have to wait for the outcome of the January special election in the Senate in Georgia. So we had to wait for that. So there's more waiting and more frustration. And now we're in this period of time. We're in the middle of that surge that we talked about earlier in COVID-19 cases. So that was a very difficult time. But finally things changed. The federal government has directed unprecedented aid to states, to schools, to municipalities, and the first wave of that allowed the state to promise school districts that it would maintain all of the aid that we had in our original budget proposal last year, which was obviously great news. We knew at that time we were going to be able to start to build back some of the staff positions, or many of the staff positions that we had to eliminate last fall. And you can see on that third line down, we've added in March and April about 180 positions back for the third quarter and the fourth quarter, which again is about to begin. So that has been a tremendous boost for us, both in terms of what we're able to do for our students in person and building back those in-person opportunities for our students, especially the students who have not had them this school year, but also, frankly, from a morale point of view. It has been so good for all of us to see so many of our colleagues back in our buildings, back at work, people who these were not people who we eliminated because we didn't want them in the organization any longer. These were people who were critical to what our students need and deserve, and were excellent at providing those services. And it was wrenching for all of us, including our students and our families. And it's been great to have the opportunity now to start to bring many of those folks back. So some additional adjustments that were made to some of the expenses that we expect for next year, which got us to a rollover budget where we're at right now this minute for what we have as an organization now, that it would need to sustain that moving forward with an adjusted rollover of about $270.1 or $2 million. Then, in the next, there are two big revenue sources that we rely on every year. One, of course, is our state aid, and that was about a week late this year. But last week they finally finished that, and it was good news for us. And I won't go through that table completely, although I'm glad to answer any questions. But the main thing to look at, then the main thing that we always look at is that foundation aid line. That is the basic funding that we use to sustain the vast majority of staffing programs, the vast majority of what we do for our students day in and day out in the school year. That's the money that we need to sustain ourselves moving forward. That was not only flat last year, there was zero increase in our foundation aid. The state also took away $4.5 million and plugged it back in with one-time federal dollars. But once those one-time federal dollars are gone, and they will be gone when June 30th gets here, we were very glad to see that our foundation aid for the coming year includes the restoration of that $4.5 million. So that foundation remains where at least it should have been as we move forward. And again, that's flat compared to 2019-20, but it's still better than being $4.5 million behind financially. And then in addition, we have an increase of about $9.5 million on our foundation aid on top of that. And once again, that's a $9.5 million increase essentially over 2 years, because we were flat last year. But you can see as we work through that table, the sum is about a $14 million increase in all of those categories in state aid for next year. And this expands on that a little bit more. The local revenue, as you can see at the moment, and that does not include any increase in the tax levy. That line that you're looking at there will reflect a 0% tax levy increase, and that's something that the board is very much working through at the moment, and we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But essentially flat in the local aid. You can see that $14 million increase in our state funding, and that the federal line, that $5.7 million reduction is essentially that one-time aid that we received last year, that the state received last year, and plugged into school district budgets to sustain them. I'm sorry, that they received this year finally from the federal government. That's the CARES Act funding that allowed them to make us whole for next year. But that's federal money, one-time federal money, and it's going away this year. But it was a great relief for everybody to have that this year, just to be able to to know that we were going to be whole for this school year. But those funds are going away. And then you can see we're anticipating about $2.7 million in other reductions in our revenue. And you can see what some of those categories may have been. The net of that is an increase of about $5 million in revenue once these items are taken into account. And there are certainly other items that will be taken into account before the budget is finalized. So that gets us, we talked about the adjusted rollover budget, what it would cost us to sustain exactly what we have now. And then the revenue that we just walked through very quickly totals about 266.5, and you can see we're short about $3.7 million currently to sustain the rollover budget, which is where we are at currently in terms of staffing, programs, et cetera. So as I mentioned, in June and September, the combination was about 360 positions that we eliminated in the school district. And once the state's finances stabilized with the help of that federal aid, we've been able to add back about 180 of those positions. Obviously, that's even me as an English major, I can do that math. That leaves us, significantly behind in terms of where we were in staffing a year ago. So now, and the board is meeting at this moment, their discussion tonight will include a discussion of 3 possible scenarios to continue to strategically rebuild our staffing and programs for next year, to look at how we can continue to add back with the resources we have available to us, add back staff and programs to provide our students with the supports that they're going to need, and the supports that they need anyway, and the supports that we know they're going to need additionally because of all that's happened academically and from a social, emotional, mental health perspective over the past year, or it'll be almost a year and a half by the time we get back to school in September. And these additions would be an increase on that adjusted rollover budget of about $270 million that we talked about a moment ago. So how do we fill those gaps? And these are some additional revenue sources that are still available to us and that the board is considering as we move forward. We have about $5.7 million in our unrestricted appropriated fund balance. That some portion of that could be applied to the budget to help us close that gap. Some level of a tax levy increase would help us close that gap a little bit as well. That 1.87 that's there reflects what the additional revenue would be if we went up to our tax cap. Our tax cap for this year is 1.56%. And again, there are a number of scenarios that the board is looking at that I'll talk about in a moment. And there are those two additional pools of federal aid that are earmarked for our school district. Again, I'll talk about those a bit more coming up. The Sarissa funds would be over the next 2 school years, and the ARP or American Recovery Plan funds would be over the next 3 years. And there's a look at what tax levy scenarios would be like. You can see that 1.56 is our, that would be right at our tax cap number. If we did go up to 2%, you can see the additional revenue that would bring in for us and all the various scenarios along the way. And I want to be very clear that a 0 tax levy increase also is still something that the board is actively discussing. So all of those options are available. If we do have an increase above 1.56%, that would require a supermajority voter approval, 60% of the voters. But I feel very comfortable, even though the work's not done, and telling you that won't be necessary, that whatever our tax levy increase is for next year, if we have a tax levy increase for next year, it will certainly be below our tax cap figure. At least that's where everything seems to be pointing at the current time. And that's kind of where we've been. You can get a look at our 5-year tax levy increase here. The average over that 5-year period is just a shade over 1%. We've been under 2% for each of the last 7 years. The board and the district take this very seriously. We know what our students need and deserve, but we also understand the financial reality of our community, and that those two things are always paramount, side by side, as we move through this process, and making sure that we are not overtaxing our community to support what our students do need and deserve is critical for this school district. And that I think we're in for a long conversation tonight as they weigh that, and we've got 2 more meetings next week, and that'll still be one of the top points of conversation as they're moving forward. I talked about the Sarissa funds just a little bit. You can see that $13.5 million number that's available to us there, and there are some specific areas that can be used in. That is a big number, and we're certainly glad to see it. But we also have to be careful with the one-time federal funds. As I've talked about a little bit with some of the one-time federal funds that got us through this year, they are one-time federal funds. If we use those funds to hire a math teacher, those funds won't be there next year to support that math teacher. So we have to find some other way to be able to sustain that math teacher, or we would have to let that math teacher go. So we have to be very careful at how we use this federal funding that's available to us, because there is a fiscal cliff waiting out there when this federal funding goes away, depending upon what happens with the state's finances over time. That could be devastating for our school district as well. And we are being very cognizant of all those things as we move forward. I think it's and again, there's a lot of work to be done in the next 7 days, but I do think it's likely that all or a majority of that 13.5 will be used in next year's budget, in the 21-22 budget, and again, that's to support the gap that we have currently just in our rollover budget, but also to build back those additional programs. To try and strategically, we're not just going to add back every person that we've had to reduce in the last year, but to strategically bring back more of those people to support our students. And not to be redundant, but it is worth repeating more than once. We have to be very careful with the use of those one-time funds so that we know what we're investing in for this year is something that we can sustain for next year and the years to come. And then we also have the American Recovery Plan funds that are available to us for the next 3 years. So again, there is significant federal funding to help states balance their return from the COVID-19 economic crisis, and that is tremendous. It's unprecedented, the aid that the federal government has directed to states and to schools, and we are grateful for it. But we all have to be very careful in how we allocate those funds, so that in year 4 we're not left with that fiscal cliff that I'm sure you've heard many people talk about previously. And there are at the moment. The American Recovery Plan funds in particular have a 20% cap on how much of that you can use to spend on staff. We're still waiting on additional guidance, but they're currently saying you can't just apply all of that to staff. So we'll be looking at many items in all of these categories. So our next steps, if you want to have a cup of coffee and join us for a further discussion about this on Saturday morning, we'll be on Microsoft Teams with a virtual community budget presentation, and that will be a great update based on the conversation that the board is having tonight about how this that we've talked about is moved forward. Two board meetings next week, and I do expect that they'll adopt the budget proposal at next Thursday's meeting. We will present at the CANA meeting on May 5th. And, I will go through the litany of it, but you can see that those other opportunities there leading up to budget vote day. We're also presenting to the Common Council in May, and we have a presentation at the end of this month for the Albany NAACP, and are glad to present for other community organizations as well, in addition to these that we have. All of our budget information is at albanyschools.org/budget. So if you want to just keep that in mind, so you can keep checking for updates and new information as we move forward. I encourage you to do that. In a sign of the times, we're going to have hybrid voting options for voters this year, which actually is the way voting always is, with one important new COVID-19 absentee option this year. We will have in-person voting at 15 locations citywide on May 18th, and those are our regular locations with one exception that's noted there. Masks and social distancing will be mandatory at all of those locations. All of the COVID-19 protocols that we follow in our schools, we will follow at each of our voting locations. Wards 10 and 13, which are, I'm assuming all or most of you, will vote at Pine Hills Elementary School. And you can see that one new location will be at the Italian American Community Center Pavilion, not the building itself, but the pavilion next door or behind. The Teresian House is our normal voting location in that area, and they are, we can't be there this year because of COVID-19. So we had to find another location, and we were very fortunate to be able to partner with the Italian American Community Center to keep it right in that same part of town. And then there will be absentee voting as well. And as I mentioned, along with the traditional absentee options, the state will allow concerns regarding potential COVID-19 exposure at the polls as a reason for requesting an absentee ballot. And I also wanted to know too that our budget vote this year, and this hasn't happened I've been with the district, it's my 14th year. Shabbat is almost always around this time of year, but it has never fallen on the budget vote previously, and this year it does. The last day of Shabbat is May 18th. So that is something to keep in mind as well as we move forward. And I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, Ron. And I apologize to all. I asked you to put questions in the chat, but it appears chat is not operating. One of the fun things about Zoom is they keep changing their default options without telling you. So I'll get it started. I noticed that the federal aid was really one of the biggest avails that you had for the coming year, but you're worried, as you said, because you'd face a fiscal cliff. Yeah. But I guess you would too if you use the district's own fund balance, and then you'd also have lower fund balance to access in later years. So I guess there are a series of difficult things to figure out, and you can't tell us how it's going to work now. But I did want to ask, the foundation funding, did I understand you correctly? Is that now totally and fully funded, at least in terms of what is in statute for that formula? No, we are not there yet, and that's a great topic to touch on, and I'm glad you brought it up. We receive about 70% of our foundation aid funding this year, and it's been wonderful to see. We have a formal legislative advocacy process that we work through every year with our legislators across the street, and particularly our local legislators. And I have to say that Neil Breslin and Pat Fahey and John McDonald are, as I'm sure you all know, terrific advocates for not just our community, but for public education in our community. And they are strong supporters of the things that our students need and deserve. And they deserve a lot of credit for what really is, in the context of a worldwide pandemic that we're still in, good news for us this year. So we still got a ways to go before we're at full foundation aid, but as you know, that is something that now the state is finally telling us they're going to work toward. We'll have to, there are details to come on that as we move forward over the next several years. But the idea, I think this year they were raising everybody up to 60% this year. And I don't know what their intent is for next year. But for over 3 years, the intent is to get everybody to full foundation aid. For us, that would be about $32 million annually, which would be significant for us. And that's one of those potential revenue streams that's out there
that would allow us to use the one-time federal funding that we have currently. And then in year 4 is when we'd be getting to that point where we would be at full foundation aid funding, which is, it's wonderful. You know, we've talked to them every year about this and never really walked away from the Capitol feeling like there was a lot of hope of that. And now there is, and that's terrific for all schools, but particularly for high need school districts like ours. So that is something that we'll be watching very closely as it moves forward. And that is something that we have in our minds as we're planning. We can't spend the money that we don't have, but we also know that there are some options potentially out there. You know, they've developed some new revenue streams this year through legalizing marijuana, and with some of the wealth tax that they've increased this year. So it remains to be seen how those revenue streams will impact school funding going forward. But certainly, we'd like to think that they would have a positive impact on school funding going forward. So those are new developments this year too that we're aware of. That as we look ahead, that when the federal government does finally pull back, all of this aid that it's provided to to states and to schools and municipalities to help all of us get through this tough time, that the state will be more than back on its feet and able to sustain public education and education in our community at an even higher level than it has traditionally.
That sounds good. We have a couple more questions. Leah Golby, you've had your hand up for a while.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Yep,
Leah has
it's
a
me.
question.
Oh,
Hey, Ron, how are you?
good. Is this Virginia?
No, it's Leah Golby.
Oh, Leah, how are you? Sorry.
I'm good, thanks. No problem. Really glad to hear about the foundation aid, and fingers are crossed that we're actually going to get to full foundation aid in the next few years. And I'm glad that the board is trying to rehire as many people as possible, because it seems to me that our students need everybody back and then some. I think there will be need for a lot of supports. So I'm glad that we do have this opportunity for the federal funding. So is the intention of the district to go after both of those pots, the full amount that's available for the federal funding, and you're just trying to decide how to use it?
Right. How to use that funding over these next 3 years to really land to do exactly what you just described. Investing in additional social emotional supports for our school district, and that's been a priority for us for a number of years. But we know that need is going to be even greater when we come back fully from the pandemic and we're back in school fully. This has been, as everybody knows, and nobody needs me to tell you all how difficult this has been. This has been trying for many of our students and families, and we know that our students are going to come back to us with those new needs, and we have to be ready to address them, and we're planning to address them the best we can. We know that it will be academic needs as well, and they're going to need additional support, and we're trying to invest in those things as well. So we will not leave any of this money on the table. I can assure you that. The goal is, the trick is, the work is to do it in a way that makes sense to sustain us over these next 3 years as we start to get a better picture of what the state's full recovery is going to be and what their ability to fund education is going to be going forward, and what their new revenue streams for education are going to be. We think there will be new revenue sources there, and there was great news out of the budget process this year. But again, we have to be careful not to spend money that we don't have.
Right. And I have one more comment, and that's on the COVID protocols that are currently in place. Right. And I'm not looking at the screen right now, but I understand the masking is really important. The social distancing is really important. The sanitizing, I think, now I'm looking at it. So is there anything about ventilation in this in the current protocols? Because my understanding is the data says that sanitizing is not nearly as important as, you know, transmission through the air, and, you know, the ventilation, upgrading the ventilation system is kind of key for building safety with COVID. So
Right.
I'm wondering what the district is doing
Right.
on that front.
We meet all of the MERV 11, I believe. We meet all of the MERV 11 standards in all of our buildings for air filtration and ventilation. So we are at that standard. That's one of the additional parts, particularly with the American Recovery Plan funds, that we are waiting for additional guidance on, because we know that our federal representatives, Congressman Tonko and Senator Gillibrand in particular, but also Senator Schumer, have been very clear that that's a priority for them as well. So we have a good sense that that they're going to want schools everywhere, including here, to address that issue. And to, you know, MERV 13 has been talked about as a higher standard. And there are, I'm not an expert at all in this area, but you know, there are additional areas too, and additional ways that can be addressed. So we do have to wait for additional guidance on that component of the American Recovery Plan money to determine what those requirements are going to be, to match those against what we believe our needs are, and then, because that, you know, as you know, that could be costly, very costly, to replace ventilation systems in 20 buildings. So so that's TBD. That's something that is we're very much aware of, and something we will be planning for as we go ahead.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Leah. Carolyn, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Ron. I have a couple of questions. One, building on Leah's, weren't most of the ventilation systems in most of the buildings updated when the buildings were renovated in the 2000s and 2010s, with the possible exception of Albany High School? And so the funds that we're looking for at ventilation would be to upgrade from where they are now to a new standard. Is that what am I understanding that correctly?
That is absolutely right. And you know, as you point out, we're fortunate in this community that our community supported those facilities projects throughout all of our buildings. And you know, a lot of communities are not. A lot of communities are. They still have outdated school facilities. You know, what's New York City going to do with its school facilities if it needs to update the ventilation systems across that school system? You know, I have no idea, or no idea how expensive that would be. But right, we are very fortunate here that we have new or relatively new building stock all across the way. And by the way, we didn't get a chance to do it because of COVID, but you know, our students have been coming back gradually, and they'll be back even more in the second new academic building that we've created at Albany High School, the phase 2, the art and music building. I hope that we have an opportunity to have some sort of a community event there before too long, or eventually. It's spectacular, and so that's a quick aside. But you know, the ventilation systems in the high school are certainly part of that process that we're updating as we go along. But thank you for that, and we are in a better position than a lot of school districts because of that. Well,
that's good to know. And that was another question. My other question was not directly related to the budget, but more about the Albany High project. Has the Brooklyn moved over to Albany High already, or is that in the last phase of this project?
That is in the last phase of the project, right? Most of Brooklyn. I think there are a couple of programs in Brooklyn that are going to be incorporated into other parts of the building during phase 3, but the vast majority of the programs that are Brooklyn will be coming over in phase 4, the last phase of the project. They'll be on what is now the first floor of the old academic building, I'll call it, essentially where the cafeterias are currently, if you know the space.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I know the space.
Right.
Okay, so, thank you. That was all I had. Thanks.
Well, I don't see any more mechanical Zoom hands raised, but if anybody has a question, by all means, ask it now. Not seeing nor hearing anyone, I'm going to assume all the questions are done. Ron, thank you very much for joining us this evening and doing the best you could in the in-process circumstance you find yourself. So good luck as you continue. And thank you for telling us about those 2 additional opportunities to catch up with the school district budget. So we'll leave you to probably go to the board meeting or do your next step.
I'm going to switch from Zoom to Microsoft Teams and go to the board meeting.
So have a nice evening. And
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay. So now we're going to go to our regular committee reports. And we go first to the Committee on University and Community. Luke Rumsey, to you.
Hey, everybody. Our last CUCR meeting, we had Frank Zioli, the Deputy Commissioner for the Department of General Services, come through. He was great. He provided us with a pretty sound update on what's going on with DGS, including a few trash studies, which had started prior to COVID and then kind of took a little bit of a hiatus while COVID was going on and have now restarted back up. And the conclusion to those studies should be happening over the next several months. Including a trash can study, right? So we are concerned, obviously, given the fact that we want to see more trash cans in the Pine Hills area. And Frank had promised that once those studies had concluded, and DGS has a better understanding as to, what the needs are in the city and in the Pine Hills area specifically, that he would release those to us. And so we hope to hear back from him at some point once those studies have concluded. There were a couple cleanups that have occurred. I don't see a WUSU on, so I'll mention that there was a cleanup that he hosted on April 10th, which occurred on the corner of Myrtle and Lake. And we focused on Myrtle and Morris. We had a decent number of people show up, and it was a good day and picked up a lot of litter. We also have a very large cleanup coming up on April 24th. Thanks to Danielle and Will for helping us organize that with the Department of General Services. We'll have about 200 people there in total. That being said, we're never going to have more than 20 people on site at any one point in time. So we're going to have groups showing up throughout the course of the day. We'll be dispatching the groups to focus on specific areas in the Pine Hills community. And then obviously returning separate from one another to make sure that we are in compliance with COVID protocols. Now, speaking of COVID, the university's numbers are doing very well right now. Our positivity rates, our daily positivity rates are well below 1%. So that's excellent. And as a result, we are looking forward to an in-person graduation. Graduation is going to look a little bit differently than years past, where we would typically have everybody together at the same time with their families. We're not doing that this year. We're going to actually have graduation spanned out over the course of 5 different days. And we're going to be doing it in our stadium. And so that'll be awesome for our graduating seniors and their families to be able to check in with their school. It'll be very spaced out in the stadium. We'll have the names being read aloud over the big speakers and walking across the stage. And so that's going to be a great opportunity for them. And last but not least, I did want to share that my office, Off-Campus Student Services at the university, is going to be partnering with a new third-party vendor to launch a new housing platform. So we have been actively engaged with different landlords in the city of Albany over the last week, letting them know kind of what that platform is and how it looks. For those of you that are interested in looking to see yourself what it looks like, the site is offcampushousing.albany.edu. It's not live yet, but it is up, so you can take a look. We're building it kind of as we speak. We're hoping to launch before the end of the month. Landlords can list their apartments on the site. It is open to all UAlbany faculty, staff, and students to view those listings. And beyond just having their listings up, there's a lot of resources on there around tenants' rights, around leases and security deposits, personal safety, tips on being a good neighbor. So our hope is that it's going to educate students as well as help provide a little bit more of a safer platform for them to use. Craigslist has a lot of scams on it. Other sites, we really don't have a way of monitoring who is listing and who isn't listing. With College Pads, which is the new third-party vendor, we have a little bit more control over who is posting on this site, if they have a valid ROP and things along those lines. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really good addition for us. And that's all for me, John.
Thanks very much, Luke. So Now we're going to the Neighborhood Engagement Unit, and we have 3 representatives here tonight. We've got Sergeant Hanson, Officer Aquaviva, and also our new beat officer, Matthew Carey. So I don't know who's going to speak, but whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
I guess I'll go first. My name is Matt Carey. I'm the new daytime beat officer for Pine Hills. I've been an Albany police officer for 24 years, and this is actually the 3rd beat that I've done. I've done Lower Central Avenue and Grant Street before going to court and then coming here. I've only been here for about 3 weeks. I've talked to a lot of people. Do you have any questions for me?
Go ahead, anyone, if you do. Matt, I'm sorry I missed you the other day, but I hope I get a chance to meet you in person soon. And
I just have a question about if there are any updates in terms of how we're doing with things like burglaries and car larcenies and that kind of thing. If there's anything going on that we should know about.
Hold on, man. Let me just find the right table here. Okay, we had 1 arrest for larceny, 1 for simple assault, 1 for criminal mischief, 1 for disorderly conduct, 1 DWI, and all other, which is that is 4 with a grand total of 9.
Prior to Matt coming here, we had a rash of burglaries, but we did make a bunch of arrests on that. And so, knock on wood, I believe the burglaries have been quiet. The car larcenies have picked up with foot traffic picking up since the weather's gotten nicer, but that's citywide and not really isolated anywhere in Pine Hills.
Hey, Matt, I don't know if you have any updates on this, but I know that there was a shots fired call that took place on Ontario Street between Washington and Western over the weekend. I didn't know.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I just didn't know if there was any updates on that situation.
Yes, I was working at the time. It was an extensive crime scene. I was told that the detectives have a person of interest that they're looking for. And there was a car accident involved with that as well, involving 3 cars.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that they have someone in mind. So hopefully
do.
they'll apprehend that person soon. Thank you.
Hey, Officer Carey, welcome. I wanted to just say welcome, and you may have said this and I just didn't write it down. First of all, I have to send your email to somebody who asked me about you a while ago. Oops. Second of all, I know you're the day shift, but what days do you work?
I work Monday through Friday, 8 to 4.
Right.
And
Awesome.
I am open to making some adjustments to that.
Right, like right now. Cool. All right. Well, welcome.
What in
Great.
particular are you looking for, ma'am?
Oh, I'm not a man. What in particular am I looking for? No, somebody just asked me for your contact information. I need to get it to him. And yeah, so he wanted to know who the beat officer was. And I gave him Joe's information, and then Joe gave me yours, but now I forgot to get it to the guy, so I got to do that. So that's it. No, just welcome, and we're glad to have you here.
I appreciate the welcome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
seems like that's it. Thank you very much, Matt, Officer Carey. And
Thanks, sir.
We will move along. So going now to zoning and code enforcement, Leah.
Yes, so at our last meeting, I had announced that the Zoning and Code Enforcement Committee had just met prior to that meeting to discuss a case of on the BZA agenda for a proposed porch renovation on South Pine that the Zoning and Code Enforcement Committee supported. And so that vote, then the board voted to support that application as well before the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that case went before the Board of Zoning Appeals at its most recent meeting in late March. I spoke at the meeting on behalf of the neighborhood association. The neighborhood association had previously sent in a letter supporting the application. When I spoke, I brought up my understanding of why some of the language was in place. I quoted an article from 1992 when these provisions were first put in place that were really part of the what was once known as the overlay district, the neighborhood, the traditional neighborhood overlay district that were then built into the USDO. In any case, the BZA has not yet voted on this application, and I expect that they will be voting at their April meeting, which is coming up soon. So we will know whether or not. The BZA does not usually vote in favor of requests that come before them. It's rare that they will allow something to get through, but there's a possibility with this one that it will get through. So we shall see. That's the update.
Seeing no questions, let's go to Midtown Pine Hills Improvement Group. Carolyn.
So our next meeting is Monday, April 26th at 6:30 p.m. If anyone is interested in joining us, let me know and I will send you the link. First, I would like to thank Luke and the University at Albany for the new Cleanup for Credit program that's going on. It has made a real difference in how the neighborhood looks and getting a lot of the litter off the streets. I'm really glad they're also going to continue and expand the program in the fall. Now I'm just getting a little concerned about what the summer is going to look like, because while there are fewer people with less trash, there's still trash. And of course, the program won't be going on. It might be something to consider for the Albany Youth Employment Program over the summer if they're looking for projects for those students or for those kids. So thank you very much, Luke. It's working out really well. I've even had neighbors mention it to me, so that's great. That said, our trash and litter subcommittee is hoping to work a little more closely with DGS on some of our messaging. We were very interested in the few of us who are on that, who are also attend the CUCR meeting. We're interested in that, and I was actually glad to see that DGS is looking at expanding some programs and doing more education around recycling and litter and trash. So hopefully they will join us. We have a subcommittee meeting next Wednesday to start to talk about that and some of the other concerns that we've had. We are working on the process for getting the mural up on the side of the House of Glass and getting all of the authorizations in place and making sure that we have I recently learned that we don't yet have a design, so we're waiting on the artist for that. And I'm not sure, I think the building owner is in the process of also making the repairs that he needs to make. So, And then we're still waiting to hear back from the mayor's office about talking to them about our concerns around trees and blacktop. So that's the other main thing that we're waiting on. I think that we announced this at the last meeting, but if we didn't, there will not be Meet Much and More this year. It's too soon to have that kind of a big event. So I'm just making that quasi official in case anybody was wondering, which I doubt they were, but I just thought I'd put it out there. So hopefully the year after. So thanks, that's it.
Thanks, Carolyn. Upper Madison. Maryland or Virginia? Upper Madison?
Sorry, I forgot to put my mute off. Anyway, expect to see planters in May, and early May, we should be seeing the park, the DeWitt Park cleaned up, or not cleaned up, but spruced up. And hopefully the damaged circle will get fixed. We're waiting to get all the paperwork and approvals completed. The city has agreed to pay for the repair, so we're hoping to see that happen. We're having some general conversations about the possibility of an Upper Madison street fair in the fall. There's no definitive statement on that, but there is conversation, and that's about it.
Thanks, Marilyn.
Okay.
Treasurer? Eric?
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So currently, yeah, we've worked our way through our Trustco account challenges there. So currently we've got $6,307.56. There was a deposit of the check for the DeWitt Clinton sign update that we received. That was $1,140, and 800 of the remaining money, 837 is for the playground. Of course, I didn't subtract those two, but anyways, so our budget's slightly smaller than the school districts. And we are getting a bunch of membership renewals in, which is great. And working our way through the squaring up the Stripe and the PayPal and the mail-in ones. I just got another one today, so another mail-in renewal. And the PayPal has currently has $178.45 in it. So we've got a good number of renewals so far.
Excellent.
And that's about it. So unless, we were just going to work on a budget for last year was a little different because we just didn't really spend that much money with any kind of events. So we'll see what we can hopefully be able to do some things this summer as things open up.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Thanks, Eric.
Yep. I just had one question. I should ask this back in the public safety, but for the a couple times I've witnessed the four-wheeler and motorcycle. I don't know if I'd call it gang, but group of individuals, of law-abiding individuals riding around. Do you guys want us to call when we see those? Because I've seen them like twice this week. I mean, they go by and we just wave, and I guess what can we do in general to help out?
Or go ahead and call. We'll always send someone. However, it's a big safety issue.
Yeah.
To chase them, and obviously, we have to weigh the liability and the risk to the public. So more often than not, we're not going to chase them. But if the opportunity presents itself, if they stop the bike someplace, if they get gas somewhere,
Okay.
we'll absolutely get to them. I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but believe me, I don't ever want to tell anyone to not bother calling the police.
Okay. Okay, we'll do that next time we see him. Thanks. We're good.
Thank you.
Yep.
So now we go to membership, which our new chair is Will Sekula. And he's just changed his image. If you saw the image, Danielle Melendez, who's next to him in real time, is now, they're now married, Will and Danielle, as I think most of you know. But you had the image up there before. It was wonderful. So congratulations to you both. They got married over the weekend, and we're very happy for you both. And of course, happy for you to be helping Pine Hills out as you have for a number of years, and are recently taking up more responsibility. So having all that said, I don't want to throw you out to the wolves. Well, if you're not, you could be forgiven if you don't have a membership report today.
Yeah, so I went over it quickly, and it's looking like I didn't check in with Eric for new checks, but I'm seeing between the checks we had already gotten a few weeks ago and online membership, we have 38 up-to-date paid members, with another possible somewhere like 95 people who paid within the last 2 years that we still need to get. So that's kind of where we are right now. That's as far as I got.
I can't believe you didn't have the whole thing taken care of. I mean, you finished the whole marriage thing on Saturday, didn't you? I mean, anyway, congratulations. Yeah, we'll need to start, as you know, we couldn't send out any more using constant contact, but regular old email works as well. So, I'll touch base with you, I don't know, tomorrow or sometime. Anyway.
Sounds good.
We're doing all right. Actually, several people have commented how it's easier to pay now, but people still need to be reminded. So it's good to see the money coming in. Well, that's the end of our agenda. Anyone else have something they'd like to discuss or open up tonight?
Do we not have any electeds tonight?
We do not, and I'm not sure why. I know that they were invited, and the only person I heard from was Matt Peter, county legislator, who did have something else, but I didn't hear from anyone else. So perhaps something is going on, but I'm not aware of it. But none of them are here. Virginia?
I'm glad, I just wanted to chime in, I'm glad to know that Matt Peter is being invited, because I didn't know that he was, and he does represent a little slice of Pine Hills, but an important slice. So,
It includes me and 400 Hudson Avenue.
and me,
You?
and
No,
Nancy Goody, and a bunch of really, people who
I didn't know he
are
went.
very involved.
I'm surprised. I guess I can't expect, legislative districts to make sense. So how,
Yeah, but anyway, I'm glad he's being invited because it's, yeah, so thanks.
Did you send them a separate link? Because they're not on the link that you sent us. I'm just letting you know that.
Yeah, no, they get a separate email, but
Okay.
Can I just ask Officer Carey for the sake of the minutes, to repeat the whatever crimes there were: 1 larceny, 1 simple assault, 1 criminal mischief, 1 DWI, 1 other, and they added up to 9, but I don't have 9 here, so.
Yeah, those are the arrests. I just gotta find them again, that's all.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Okay, ma'am, you ready?
Yep.
Be 1 larceny, 1 simple assault,
Mm-hmm.
1 criminal mischief,
Yep.
1 disorderly conduct,
Oh, disorderly conduct. Yep.
1 DWI, and then
Uh-huh.
there's a category called other where there's 4.
Okay,
for the grand total of 9. But that's the arrests, ma'am.
arrest, yep. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, that appears to be it. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you in a month, and we expect we'll have Mayor Sheehan with us then. Thanks very much. Good night.
All right.